It's already evening, so good evening, dear audience. I'm glad you are still with us. I appreciate it very much. So we reach the final part of our conference, and in this part we have a very special guest for a keynote speech. And our special guest is His Excellency Ambassador of Russian Federation in Israel, Anatoly Viktorov. Ambassador Anatoly Viktorov serves in Israel since May 2018. In his last position, he served as a director of the Department of Humanitarian Cooperation and Human Rights in the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Previously, he served as a high representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Parliament and Parliament Mission of Russian Federation to the United Nations in New York and in Angola. Mr. Ambassador, this conference is close to completion. However, we remain with a lot of open questions. And therefore, we expect to hear your references about the Russian challenges in the international arena in our complicated region, and of course about our bilateral relations. So, with your permission, the floor is yours.
From where? From here? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. So many people, it's a challenge for me. I was hoping that a few of you will be here. I would like to suggest that you had a fruitful, professional, impartial, friendly discussions. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to join you from the very morning, and I cannot pretend that it will be concluding remarks because I was not attending the discussions. I will be trying to present some of Russian official views on the situation, on the current situation in the Middle East. And of course, it's my honor and happiness to address to such a distinguished audience here. And I see many famous faces here, including my Russian colleagues from various academic and scientific institutions. Unfortunately, אני לא מדבר עברית, that's why we will address to you. Ich spreche Deutsch. Говорим српски, млuvim česky, фалу португеш. אני לא מדבר עברית. Okay. Russia in the Middle East, the main topic of the conference, as I understood from these presentations. Of course, it is a matter of fact that Russia is one of the key power brokers. Let me change my glasses. Russia is one of the key power brokers and even military actors in the current Middle East. It deserves to be mentioned that Russian ties to the Middle East go back centuries and provide a valuable foundation for the current Russian activities here in the region. Starting from contacts with the Ottoman Empire and the policy of protecting Orthodox Christians living in the region, Russia has been a factor in the Middle Eastern politics and geopolitics. After the fall of colonial powers and the World War II, we established solid relations with the new Arab states and I could mention with Israel as well. It is clear that today Middle East is one of the most important regions in the world where the interests of many powers intersect: the United States, the European Union, even China. Russia is advancing its own interests and promoting a balanced agenda in order to achieve peace, security and stability in the region. And I would add, especially after this ugliness committed by some countries in the Middle East and in the Northern Africa in the form of the so-called Arab Spring. Russia and Israel, we built a very close and mutually beneficial relations. Russian President Vladimir Putin is close with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The value of trade and economic relationship between the two countries may still be a question of more efforts from both sides, but the human ties are extraordinarily warm, thanks in part to a visa-free travel regime and thanks to President Putin said that about 2 million of Russian-speaking Israelis. We also share the same views on the issue of the need for struggle against falsifying the history of the World War II and glorification of Nazism, fighting anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial around the world. Another important issue is Russia's consideration of Israel's legitimate security concerns. Almost at every meeting between the leaders of the two countries, we stress our special attention to ensure Israel's security. And this I might call a focal point of our discussion today. In 2015, Russia sent its air force and limited number of ground troops to Syria at the official request of the legitimate Syrian government. The reasons for that, I think they are well known, and I should not elaborate on them. If there is no need, if there will be a question, I can elaborate on the reasons of our involvement, because there are speculations that Russia intervened into the civil war in Syria. It's a very, very wrong assessment. We are not part of the civil war. We are part of the fighting against international terrorism at the request of the Syrian government. And the second point for our intervention was to ensure security and safety of our internal life in Russia and in the neighboring countries, because so many terrorist fighters were involved in the activities of the Daesh in this region, and they were affecting the situation in our countries. It was a need for us to intervene. And the third factor for me was justice. It's not funny, it's justice. And the fourth was restoration of the rule of international law. Everybody is eager to speak about the rule of law, but we are speaking about the rule of international law. And for us, international law is not just words, it's a very, very serious issue. It's a foundation of the current international relations. Okay, and today we continue to assist in the Syrian settlement based on the UN Security Council resolution 2254 and decision taken by the Syrian National Dialogue Congress held a year and a half ago in Sochi. We have welcomed the beginning of the Constitutional Committee's contacts in Geneva more than a month ago, but additional efforts in the Astana format should be done in order to put an end to the terrorist presence in the Idlib province and to stabilize the situation on the eastern bank of the Euphrates. Another significant issue is the need of international assistance to restore the destroyed Syrian infrastructure. This is important for refugees and internally displaced persons to return to their homes. At this point, I would avoid criticizing the approaches of our Western partners who are just making notes to us and to our partners within the Astana format and putting flags and deadlines for us when and how political process should go, in order to allow them to intervene with humanitarian and economic assistance. A very, very wrong approach in our assessment. Another significant issue is the need of international assistance to, I said that. Today we also maintain a dialogue with the Kurds including representatives of the Syrian Democratic Forces, primarily in the context of the implementing of the Russian-Turkish Memorandum of October 22nd this year, concluded by President Putin and President Erdogan in Sochi, which involves withdrawing the Syrian Democratic Forces and military equipment to 30 kilometers from the Turkish-Syrian border. These agreements were approved by President Assad, which is important, and the leaders of the Syrian Democratic Forces. The withdrawal of the troops is almost completed. We call on our Kurdish counterparts from the Syrian Democratic Forces to act consistently without being influenced by a third party. In the interest of ensuring the rights of the Kurds, there is no alternative to embarking on a course of a dialogue with the legitimate Syrian authorities as part of developing the approaches that ensure Syria's stability and security through the efforts of the Syrian Constitutional Committee. We are concerned that certain representatives of the Syrian Democratic Forces are hoping that I should call the country by the name. I'm trying to avoid in many occasions, but okay, it's inevitable here, that the United States will provide them with a quasi-state autonomy in Syria. We see certain signs that some of them are willing to support such an idea, and this is a case for us to be concerned. Russia is doing its utmost to ensure that the Syrians will decide on the future of the country themselves in full accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 2254. The agreements that will be reached, in particular and primarily during the Constitutional Committee meetings in Geneva, by and between the Syrians themselves, must be accepted and respected by all the international community. We hope that the UN, along with the Astana III, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, will help to facilitate this process. As we are short in time, let me briefly speak about other countries in the Middle East that Russia is actually cooperating with. Unfortunate actions of regime changes in Iraq and Libya. Actually, I got an impression that now in the Middle East, Russia is correcting mistakes made by somebody else, because to destroy states is easier exercise than to restore statehood and national reconciliation. It's just my remark. It's a footnote, and. Unfortunately, actions of regime changes in Iraq and Libya have led to, in fact, the destruction of these countries' statehood. Iraq has more or less succeeded in bringing its state back to normal. We are actually helping our Iraqi colleagues, including by increasing the combat effectiveness of the security forces and the army in fighting the remaining terrorist groups. In Libya, the situation is much worse, although the international community is making efforts to establish some kind of inclusive dialogue. But there are too many external players there, and it has so far been impossible to start a sustainable process. The situation in Yemen is still very hard. According to the United Nations, the country is facing a major humanitarian catastrophe that can only be resolved through all-inclusive talks. Russia has been encouraged by the proposal put forward recently by the Houthi movement for a ceasefire and the beginning of talks. Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, responded positively, which is a good mark. And we believe UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, will rely on these latest moves to find a way to a future solution. Russia is very concerned about the, once again, revisionism in the US policy on the settlement in the Middle East. the settlement between the Palestine and Israel. The two-state solution is actually being brushed aside, and the efforts of the quartet of international mediators have actually been blocked. We are being told that the deal of the deal of the century, it's not an accident, it's planned in advance joke. Deal of the century is about to be announced, but we wait in vain. We can guess that now the issue of renouncing the two-state solution will be raised. At this point, Russia, the entire Arab world, and all other UN members will firmly adhere to the resolutions that were adopted by the UN Security Council and that must be implemented. A few words about Iran. Regrettably, the United States, once again, I'm talking about the Russian policy. The United States is trying to demonize and isolate the Islamic Republic of Iran. We see such actions as a short-sighted policy. The withdrawal of the United States from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or other words, the Iran nuclear deal, was a typical example of a total disregard for international law and UN Security Council decisions. Not only did the United States refuse to deliver on these decisions, it forbids other countries from observing the Iran nuclear deal and the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, threatening to impose sanctions on them. It's a very unfortunate situation. I can elaborate on many topics I mentioned, including this one. Let me continue. Another disturbing initiative by our American colleagues is in the region is so-called Arab NATO, an international coalition to protect navigation in the Persian Gulf. These actions draw delimitation lines against the Islamic Republic of Iran. No doubt it is important to ensure security in the Persian Gulf, but Iran also has proposals, and they coincide with the Russian initiative that all countries join forces and patrol the world's major waterway, ensuring safe navigation there. We suggest starting talks about drafting a collective security concept for the Persian Gulf region, which core idea is that only creating a truly inclusive regional security system can serve as the foundation for ensuring a decent future for all the peoples of this strategically important part of the world. The main principles of the concept are multilateralism and strict observance of international law, primarily the UN Charter and the Security Council resolutions. In mid-September, I would like to remind, this idea was broadly discussed by experts in Moscow at the Institute of Oriental Studies. I think that seminar was mentioned during your discussions today, and in the Institute of Oriental Studies, which belongs to the Russian Academy of Sciences. I arrived to concluding remarks. I would like to say that relying on the situation in the Middle East, we can conclude that it was unwise for some countries to count on the ability to control terrorists and to use them for geopolitical purposes, assuming that things could be arranged in a way would not get out of control. This was and is an illusion. Today there is a need of joint efforts to find a common solution, and this need is stronger than ever. I'm assured that Russia is an important regional player, will continue to contribute to peace efforts in the Middle Eastern region, to develop an inclusive dialogue with all the conflicting parties in order to restore peace, stability and security in the region. And I would like to finish with the question, what would happen if Russia did not intervene? Thank you very much.
Just a second. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It was a privilege for all of us. Our conference is close to the completion. Along this day, we listen here to best experts from different countries, and I believe that we have learned a lot of information and opinion about these quite complicated questions. And I do believe that at least partly the messages from this conference will reach the appropriate address. Thank you all for joining us to this long and I hope a fruitful day. Special thing I'd like to give people responsible for the organization of this event, Konrad Adenauer Foundation, especially Alexander Brakel and Lisa, participants from Israel and abroad, Uri Dekel, the director of INSS, partner of the Russian program, Daniela Daniel, and Vera, of course. INSS people which support in the organization, more Adi, Ruth, Morna, Debra, Kobi Omer, and people which summarize the conference. Thank you very much, and it's over.